I appreciate y'all being here this evening, so I'd like to get right into it so we can address any topics of particular interest in the agenda this evening and then to get us out of here at a reasonable hour. So I'd like to call this meeting of the Plympton School Committee to order at 6 o'clock. I want to acknowledge for all those in attendance that we are currently being recorded right now. And at this time, I'd just like to say thank you to so many different community members for being in the audience this evening. Do any of you have any words you'd like to share with the committee before we get into business this evening? Okay, so seeing none, just a friendly reminder that it is tradition of this committee to entertain questions, comments during the proceedings. As long as you can keep them focused and on target, we will do our best to address your questions and concerns as we proceed through the agenda. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from our December 9th, 2024 meeting? So moved. Do I have a second? Are there any amendments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. School committee correspondence. I've received none. Okay. On to new business. Town meeting items. I think we can go over this one for this meeting and just come back to it at our next meeting. Okay, so on to old business. We had a conversation at our last school committee meeting about some bullying concerns. Just to acknowledge that bullying under Massachusetts state law has a specific definition. I think our conversation was in regards to define bullying, but also just general demeanor of students towards one another in this building so students can feel safe and secure in their classrooms, and also some conversations around communication of both actual incidents within the building and planned drills that occur in the building in a timely manner so parents are aware of those, hopefully prior to their children getting home. So I was just wondering, Peter, I know you compiled some data for us on bullying, but also wanted to hear where we are with some of those canned responses we were asking for communication of incidents at the school.
Sure. I can share data. I went back as far as the 2019-2020 school year. Confirmed bullying incidents, we had 2. In 2021, we had 0. In 21-22, we had 2. In 22-23, we had 2. Last year, we had 1. And in the 24-25 school year, we've had 2 so far this year. As far as the canned comments, I've been gathering information from different schools. The middle high school has been particularly helpful. I think they just do a very good job with that. But not only from Silver Lake, to try and gather information from other towns as well, just to see who's doing a nice job with that, what language works best for us, and I think we'll be using that moving forward.
It's great to hear. I think the committee would appreciate seeing the drafts of those communications as soon as possible.
Sure. From
your end. I think it's also important for us to slow down every once in a while, because our job here as school committee members is centered around student achievement. And very often we get focused on the academic curriculum when we talk about student achievement. But honestly, I think we all acknowledge this as professional educators and parents and community members, that when kids don't feel secure in their classroom, safe at school, the best lessons by the best teachers aren't going to have the impact we want them to have. It's not going to drive achievement or growth forward. So in that light, I was just wondering where we are with the program that we're shifting away from in the DARE regards, and how are we communicating with kids and instructing kids just how to be decent citizens in our world today, besides our second step program. We're specifically talking in regards to collaboration with SROs.
Absolutely. Chief, do you want to introduce? And
Sure, yeah. Good evening, everyone. Chief Matt All, Plympton Police. So we've made a switch, and I think this has kind of been in the works since, I think, last year we kind of voted on what we're going to be doing with the school and what we're going to be doing for educational component this upcoming year. So what we realized about the DARE program is that the DARE it's kind of a little bit archaic. Now, what was brought into the Denton Elementary School through former officer Dana Smith was very DARE-centric, but he started to tailor it a little bit towards the end before he ultimately retired. So he was already preemptively trying to get us into a different educational component of not just drugs and alcohol, but bullying, self-awareness, and how to engage in other kids and understand emotions and everything like that. So he kind of got the ball rolling for us. But what we've realized is that just by trademark, there's a lot of tools that aren't, when DARE originally rolled out back in the mid-90s, it was a very robust program. It was, the trademark was very, very engaging. And we found that going to a LEAD program is what they're, it's a more of a holistic program. It's not very, like I said, not very drug and alcohol centric. So it's law enforcement against drugs and violence. So again, there's a lot of components that we're going to be rolling out to the students. It's a 10-week program. It's drug, alcohol abuse. But again, like I said, similar to what Dana was doing, Mr. Smith was doing down here, it's really creating the program around that. So with Peter, we've kind of locked in the 10 weeks. I think we just solidify that. So the 10-week program, starting right off the bat, and I can kind of go through, quick overview of what some of like the lesson plans, look like through grades 5 and 6. But essentially, every student that's in the program, 5 and 6, is going to get a manual like this. It's a workbook to work through it. Some stuff is take home, and I think we're allocating about 40 minutes or so every single week for each grade for the students to kind of learn this program, and gives us 10 weeks towards a graduation, similar to what we did with the DARE program. But again, it's a really cool program. It's very step-by-step, even for the educator. How speak of cause and effect about whatever this topic might be, identifying and managing emotions. So again, I wasn't really well versed in what Peter has with the second step program. I think it's what Peter kind of brought me to speed this past week about what that rolls out. It's very close to mimicking, I believe, anyways, to that. So we're really excited because it's the police department kind of bridging community, but also being somewhat of an educational component down here as well. Not just drugs and alcohol, but just kind of like how to speak with each other, how to engage with each other. So we're really excited about it. We actually hosted our own internal training on it. Peter actually came to that approximately maybe a month or two ago, a couple months ago.
Yes.
So we've actually brought in other school resource officers in the community to be a part of this too, which they're going to be adopting this program. So we're kind of excited to be kind of trailblazers on this. We have a new officer down here. His name is Officer Tim Johnson. I think he's a fantastic fit. I will 100% acknowledge the fact that we've had a few different officers down here. It just hasn't worked out for whatever reason. We have another officer who's down here at the beginning of the school year who's now going to be going out on maternity. But we really feel like Tim, with what he brings, his background, he's going to be a fit down at the school for a very long time. So we're happy that he's going to kick off with this program. And from all the feedback I got, even from some parents and some school members and the staff, he's done a fantastic job already down here making a footprint. So we have the time slots available for the students. Again, we're really excited to roll it out. Does anybody have any questions about anything I kind of just flew through?
Is Officer Johnson certified in it? Did he go to training?
Yeah, so he's so with the state, as long as they're in process to get it, he can actually be an educator on it, which is good. But fun fact is that his SRO program is 1 week next week.
Okay.
So he's gonna have it done by the end of next week.
Okay.
So again, preemptively with the leave that the other officer was going on, we really wanted to find the right fit to kind of replace Robert Orr. And Tim's been a member of my department. I think he's been working in a part-time capacity for 5 years. And so he's a known person to every one of my officers, working shifts, mostly nights. But where he's at in his life, he's ready to commit full-time to it. He's been down here every day, and he's ready to do this. So he's going to get his certification by the end of next Friday. Any other questions?
Well, Chief, I really appreciate you being here this evening, reinforcing the message from the community side that couples with what the school side's trying to do here, and just instilling upon our students good citizenship, good interpersonal skills, and hopefully the intervention of SROs in combination with teachers will help prevent those students in later years from having to deal with your officers in a different capacity. That's our hope. that even when kids have transgressions at this level, that this is still an educational setting, and that we can work with that child and their family and their peers when ready to really learn from our mistakes and move forward as a community together. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate it. If I could just say one more thing, Jason,
Please.
about that, expand. It's for me, taking on this position 3 years ago now, it was, and Peter knows the story, I feel like I say it every time I see him, it was the most important thing for me to keep going in continuation from what Officer Smith did down here, but to really rebuild on it and build off of those building blocks he created. It was the number one thing that I wanted to make sure that we still did in my administration, to make sure that we here and part of the school. And I can't say enough for even the vote a couple of years ago to put this thing in play last year. It was not what I had planned for, but the amount of feedback I got from the parents and the town as a whole to be a part of this, even at this level, elementary, I can't thank you enough. And we love it too, just for our perspective, officers. There's nothing more rewarding that I can speak with than anybody that's been in the school since Officer Smith left. That it's fulfilling a lot for my officers too, believe it or not, because the people that we're putting down here care very much about the students. So when they go to their soccer games and they're a part of, going by on a Saturday and you see them on the field, it means a lot to them too. So to be afforded that opportunity, I also thank the community, because it's been a great partnership. So it means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
So the community, the school, we've invested resources, time, positions in trying to address concerns that parents have brought forth over the years. I never enjoy having those conversations, but I am also always there to have those conversations with concerned parents of students in the school. We created a position several years ago, and Mrs. Marcolini becoming the coordinator of student services. We've doubled our investment in the Second Step program, but also instituted the PBIS behavior management system here at the Dennett, and in conjunction with the chiefs bringing the SROs into our building and the LEAD program for our kids. I'm really hoping that this can help allay some of the concerns that we do have our eyes on the concerns of students not feeling comfortable, not feeling included, and of those students who are feeling ostracized by their peers. We care, and we're paying attention to those concerns as a school. Anybody else from the committee?
Just a couple questions, a point of clarification. So this says confirmed bullying incidents 202212. What is considered a confirmed bullying incident?
So anything that comes across our desks as far as, I feel like I'm being bullied, or I get a phone call from a parent, that immediately launches an investigation. We go right through the handbook. We have a process that we go through. At the end, we make a determination, does this fit the criteria of actual bullying by definition? Sometimes people have different opinion about what that definition truly is. And sometimes we get cases, we were just working on one today, that there were some kids that weren't getting along, but it was not bullying. That's a difficult and sometimes lengthy process to go through, and something that we take very, very seriously.
Thank you for that clarification. The last question. So from this year to last year, we're only halfway through this year, and I know it's only an N of 1, but it is a 100% increase, and we're only halfway through the school year. Are you concerned about that?
Concerned, yes. I'd like it all to be zeros,
Sure.
obviously. I think if it was a number that was much higher, Rob, I would be greatly concerned. Yeah, the fact that it's anything more than 0, I don't love and I don't embrace it, but we're working on it, absolutely.
Thank you.
And included in our packets was our own policy, JICFB, which delineates the Massachusetts MGL and CMRs that define bullying. And bullying is something that can occur in person. It's also something that can happen through cyberbullying. And even outside of school hours, if it then impacts the ability of students to feel safe and access the curriculum because of the confirmed bullying. And that can also be something that the school does have the right to pursue in putting into place student safety plans and interventions, and also consequences sometimes for students who would make transgressions.
Jason, can I amplify my response real quick? As we were going through and looking back at some of these case by case, we're finding a direct connection with technology. A lot of things are happening with phones, and a lot of things are happening after school hours, and that makes it even more challenging, where it's not happening directly in front of us, so to speak. But the amount of situations that correlated directly to use of technology and not school-issued devices was actually kind of eye-opening. But I thought I did that.
Yeah, so I would just implore the community. I'm a parent myself. I know it's not always easy, but to be having conversations with the children about their use of technology, their social media profiles, their messages. Like I said, I know it's not always easy, but it's worth intervening, having those conversations, checking messages when possible, seeing what kind of interactions your child is engaging with, especially at the elementary level when it might be something that's new to them and they haven't quite figured out the permanency or the harm that can be done by some of these messages that get out there. Anybody else? Sean?
Yeah, and I think part of the issue that we find, it's not just with kids, unfortunately, is that it's a lot easier to say things electronically than it is to say it to someone's face. And so that creates that added thing. And then looking over the policies, I mean, the policy and, of course, the state law does narrow the definition. Can you just talk a little bit about what we do when an interaction happens and it's not bullying, that it's clearly not appropriate?
There's a phone call placed home to parents. We try to communicate. Christine and I were on the phone virtually all day today. We had a situation that we were looking into that involved 5 students. Like I said, it was not considered bullying, but still wanted parents to be aware that I spoke to your child today, Mrs. Marcolini spoke to your child today. If it's something that we feel that a consequence is needed or necessary, we will go ahead and do that. The situation today that we were dealing with, without getting into super specifics, parents were all very grateful that we notified them. Much to your point, Jason, they said we're going to make sure that we're checking the phones more frequently, and so that's all we're asking.
I view this as, I mean, you know, we're talking about still young kids. You know, even 6th graders are still young. And to me, it's a learning opportunity, not just for the receiver of it, but also for those that are sending. That this is too far and we need to back it off, and it's not appropriate. And so that's really what I think is important, is that we treat these as learning opportunities. And I think it's also important that, you know, we are going to have the SRO down here, and it's not a police matter, but the SRO is part of the Bennett community. Correct. And understanding that some of this stuff is going on could be really helpful in them being able to have those casual interactions with students on either side of the events. And so I would encourage you, as this program develops, to utilize all the resources, because ultimately we want the kids to feel good. And we all went to school too. We didn't have the technology, but this stuff happened back then too. I actually feel a little bit bad for the kids. They have all this great access to technology, but they get all the bad stuff that comes with it too.
Correct. Absolutely.
Anybody else before we move on?
Quick question, and I apologize to everyone for my late arrival, but, and if I missed this already, but could you tell me what grade these bullying, these confirmed bullying incidents happened in?
I don't have that level of detail. I can tell you off the top of my head, it's usually 3rd through 6th.
Seeing no further comments or questions on this topic, I appreciate everyone paying careful attention to this. Just like I said, student achievement is directly impacted on how students feel every day when they walk through the doors and when they get off the bus and head in the house in the evening. So thank you. So moving on to the next item, Halifax had applied for a grant from the state to explore some regionalization options. They were awarded that grant for $125,000. The grant was transferred then to the town of Kingston because the Kingston had already approved the MBTA Commuter Communities Act. And there was some questions of whether or not the grant would be able to stay in Halifax. Regardless, Halifax and Kingston have put together a regionalization exploration group, and they would like a member of the school committee, a member of the finance committee, a member of the select board of each of the 3 communities to participate in this. So tonight, I wanted to know how you felt about sending a representative and potentially voting on who that would be. I am more than happy to be our representative on that group, but I'm open to discussion.
100%.
So it is a motion, yeah.
So I personally don't think this makes much sense. I don't think there's going to be a savings that anyone thinks they're going to get. I do know that others in town government are not interested in participating. That said, I do think after listening to the discussions that it's important that we have some input there to make sure that the focus is that what we're looking at is appropriate. I mean, the vast majority of the costs are teaching costs and fixed costs that aren't going to change. That said, I think you have a lot on your plate, and not that I don't, but I would be willing to attend and see what we have to do. I do know there is not much appetite in Plympton for this, and to give over control of such a large portion of our budget to a regional committee. But I do think we need to at least have some representation there to bring back to the town.
Any comments, concerns? Yes, sir.
Question. It was kind of a hot topic at the meeting in Kingston a couple weeks back. I'm assuming you were online watching.
Well, I was sitting in the audience being scolded for not wanting.
Oh, were you? I was in there, I didn't see that. I was struggling to understand the dynamic that I was looking at because we had Halifax and Kingston very nearly begging us to partake in a what to me seemed like it's just a study on if it is beneficial to do so. And I was reading the room on the third leg of the triangle, and it was clearly as somewhat to what you're saying right now. So, someone who's ignorant to the process, what are the potential positives and negatives to this regionalization, both from maybe the school side and the committee side, and why would we, as a town, not be interested? Or why would we be not interested in being regionalized? And what's keeping us from partaking in the study?
Well, you want me to go first?
Don't hold back. I want to hear it all.
There certainly are some benefits for full regionalization. It means that there's one school committee, not 4. And that certainly would be a benefit to the administration because they'd be dealing with one group of people. There still would be, you know, a lot of the staff would stay the same. You're still going to need a principal in each building. You know, you're still going to have a fair amount of overhead from my perspective. There potentially are, the regional transportation that potentially has some benefit to the extent that remains something that's only for regional schools. There's, I think, a bill that's been put forward to make that pot of money available to all districts.
When you say that, that would be
some reimbursement for the costs that we're doing to bus people around. Okay. So could be cost savings there. There could be some other spots where there's cost savings. You know, it does also spread out across. So if you look at, we had special ed, everything from last year, and I know you were following along last year too. We moved a chunk of our special ed, namely pre-K and 7 to 22, moved up to Silver Lake. Okay, and you know, with that came changes here and an ability to sort of so costs for kids going in the Silver Lake program are borne by the 3 towns based on their representation. So it does tend to soften blows because sometimes special ed can go up and down town to town. I think from a town perspective, some of the feelings and concerns with full regionalization are being able to do what we want to do in the demo. Okay, so if we decide we want to fund a position, we go to town meeting and we talk to our voters and we fund the position. That doesn't mean we're necessarily going to have that level of control when you're looking across the entire elementary community. Because now you're going to be looking at not just Dennett Elementary, but the other elementary schools as well. And we can see that in some of the numbers that Sarah has presented in other meetings, that per student, amount of money spent per student, we spend a different amount than does Halifax or Kingston. And so when you have, like, then that's been the choices that this town has made. Also, when you look at the two school budgets, that takes up over 50% of our budget from a town perspective.
What does?
The elementary and Silver Lake budgets represent over 50%, somewhat close to 60% of the budget.
Okay.
That now would be, we would have our representative vote at the school committee level to decide what happens with that budget, not here where we decide what we want to do with our budget with our own townspeople. So I think there's a concern with the loss of control, and that the financial benefit would not necessarily offset that loss of control. And that was brought up. At the meeting as well. And so we'll have to see where that goes. But generally, I think folks on the finance committee, the Board of Selectmen, and others in town have thought about this because it's been talked about for a number of years.
Sure.
And I think they're on the side of not wanting to lose control and be able to keep Dennett.
Now, before I ask you also, why not? What's the hesitation to partaking in the study? Is it just because it's a gateway and a slippery slope potentially, or?
Yeah, it could be. Also,
it's a free study, right? At least free.
Well, for us, we're not
Yeah.
paying for anything. It's not our grant. After listening at that meeting, I came to the decision that it would be better to be able to see how they're looking at things and have input on that, to make sure that the study is done right, than to not participate. Because I'm not sure we would get a vote through in town, regardless of what the study says. Sure. Unless it's remarkable. But that's, I'm reading the tea leaves.
Okay.
I think that's what it's.
So, I think that everyone involved in looking into the pros and cons of the regional study really just want to find out what are the potential benefits and the potential costs, and ultimately give that information to the three towns to decide as to whether or not they think the savings and the efficiencies, and not necessarily just fewer school committee meetings, because that's the least of our worries when we talk about the budget. The reality is the complexity of a multi-district district. So I think that from that perspective, it's an inefficient system to be partially regionalized. There are potential savings with being able to share positions in some cases, but that's not going to be enough to make people want to give up control. I think the big potential savings would be being part of a regional school district. You're entitled to regional school transportation reimbursement, which you currently do not receive right now. The other issue is that you can work with your legal counsel to put things into the regional agreement to help maintain certain aspects of local control that you want to continue to see. So one of the things we would do is ask our attorney to also participate in that, to talk about what kind of language can be worked in to maintain certain aspects of local control as well. So for example, some people fear redistricting. If we became one district, does that mean kids from this school would have to go to, if the superintendent decides to redistrict? You can put into your regional agreement language that would prevent that. So that isn't a foregone conclusion. Those are things that we could work together on. But ultimately, I think people who wanted to look into the pros and cons want the information to be available to the public so that the public can make that decision especially in light of the amount of budgetary constraints that we've been facing.
You mentioned some inefficiencies. Can you give me some specifics and what sort of a magnitude we're talking about?
So, I'll let Sarah.
So this is actually really a special ed conversation, but if you look at certain staff, certain types of staff, OT, PT staff, for you to hire one here, one of each, or have a fleet of each, that might be cost prohibitive, but if there was a team in the district that spent time here, time in Halifax, time in Kingston, that would be more efficient. So things like that.
Okay. And we would need to be regionalized to accomplish that task? We can't have a 60% employee here and a 40% employee somewhere else? To throw numbers?
We could. The reality is that another inefficiency is the fact that there are 4 end-of-year reports. There are 4 budgets that need to be submitted and only 1. So in reality, we've been told many times at the district level that we're understaffed in central office with the complexity and nature of our financial systems. So that position constantly gets overlooked and pushed aside year after year, and it's not a good way to run a business when
Who
you're.
above the superintendent would say that?
I'm sorry?
Who above the superintendent position would say that your positions are too complicated?
Who above?
Who is giving that information to
our
her?
auditor.
Okay.
Our auditor comes in on a regular basis and says that we're understaffed.
Okay.
Our financial auditor.
For the regionalization, what is the, just because of my ignorance, what is the process of doing that? Is there a reality where if Halifax and Kingston want to regionalize and we don't, could it still happen?
Yes. We've been told legally it can still be.
But not at Silver Lake. But
It would,
it would be then a separate district.
you could still attend, Plympton could still attend Silver Lake schools, but they would be charged a tuition is what we're being told. By both Mars
How can you
and our
change the
attorney.
Silver Lake agreement without all 3 towns agreeing?
Again, we haven't been through the process, but that's what we're being told.
Yes, I guess that's a piece of information that we could get out of this study, if that's possible to do that or not, correct?
Yeah, we've been told by legal counsel and by the Mass Association of Regional Schools that we could in fact have two towns agree to regionalize, and if the third one does not agree to regionalize, then they could have the option of tuitioning in to that region or not, going elsewhere.
Since we have an existing agreement.
Yes.
I was just curious, when you were talking about the school committees and how there would be one, how, again, this could be, I'm assuming would be looked at into that study, but as a tiny town that's, maybe 10% of the total, would we end up, sorry, not we, you, would
Have
you be
equal
a
voice.
4th, or would you be a 10th? Or would that be a question to bring up in the study?
I can answer that question with current census data. The joke on Silver Lake Regional School Committee, which I've been a member of for over a decade, is that I was half a man. Okay? They were nice about it. They used to count Halifax as 2 votes and Kingston members as 2 votes, and I got 1 vote. But in reality, the 2 Plympton School Committee members on the regional school got half a vote each. We are now at the point that we're together, Lucas and myself, are less than 1 Kingston member's vote. Because it's done by the census per our regional agreement. It's sort of like the Senate and Congress, whereas the larger towns get more congressmen. But if any one town walks away from the table during a meeting per se, like if Lucas and I just don't like the way things are going, if we get up, the meeting's over. Because in order to have a quorum at Silver Lake, you need a quorum plus a member from each of the 3 towns. And we've never done that. And we hope to God we never have to do that. But that's one of the only really positions of authority we have. we don't like the direction something's going to really assert ourselves. Because if the two towns' members vote one way, and the two towns' town meetings vote that way also, the votes of the Plympton school committee members and our town meeting members is kind of moot at that point. So I believe that it's important for us to have someone at that table. A lot of the begging you could see was directed at me because I collaborate with members of the Kingston Select Board and Finance Committee and Halifax Select Board and Finance Committee quite often. I mean, I applaud Cody for going out, and he's the town manager of Halifax, and getting the $125,000 to do this without incurring any cost to the taxpayers of the three towns. I have concerns, but I want to know what's out there. I want to know what our options are. So I deferred to different points of view because I'm the chair. I kind of have to be, from time to time, the middle ground. But in this case, I want to see what the possibilities are and have the information to make an informed decision. So we need to.
And the good news is the Collins group we've used in Plympton before,
Right.
and they're very good.
Top notch. So John has volunteered himself to be there.
So what are we doing right now?
We're going to vote to put a school committee member from our 5 school committee members onto that group. So we have a voice and ears, and someone can report back to us and let us know how it's going.
And there was also a request, what, from FinCom and,
Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to send anybody. But
that was gonna be my question.
But I will, if I don't do it, I will report back to them as well.
Great.
So would anybody like to make the motion to appoint John?
I will make that motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any further conversation? Seeing none, all those in favor? Congratulations, John. Thank you. Okay, on to reports of standing committees, admin review.
I don't think we had anything since the, no, we did, we met and we looked at, I tried to block that in my mind for a couple hours, but coming out of that, we met to talk about a lot of different contracts and some proposals. All of that will fast forward over to June 31, and that's the 25th of February, I think, that we will actually have a full discussion out of admin review on that. So that, I assume, will also be another long meeting because there's a lot of stuff to cover. So stay tuned.
All right, and on to policy. So before I begin, can I have a motion to waive the actual reading of the policies, please?
So moved.
So do you have a second? Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. So the policy subcommittee met and we reviewed a plethora of policies. You can see that there's 15 listed here. ACAB is handbook language, but that's also our Title IX policy. Title IX has been in flux recently. Some of the changes to Title IX have actually been vacated by a federal court. But since this is just our first read, I'd like to get this on the books for us, and if we decide that the attorney has said leave this one as is, we'll just not do the second read and finalize its adoption. BEDB, the agenda format, just talks about the superintendent and the chair of the committee coming together to form the agenda and trying to get any handouts for the committee submitted with all due diligence and efforts within 48 hours of the meeting, so you have an opportunity to review that there. Use of electronic messaging by school committee members is just a codification of the fact that when we communicate with one another or with the superintendent, we're supposed to CC in on that, the executive secretary. Universal free school meals is just an update to the language now that Massachusetts has universal free school meals. So is the language change in the school nutrition policy. Many of these have to do with personal use of technology and acceptable use of digital resources for students, for staff, and also for members of the public accessing our networks. So that's all language around that. And last but not least, we get down to advertising in schools and distributions of notices. With the advent of social media and technology outside of the school realm, considering we don't have the resources to photocopy flyers anymore, and to cut down on what our front office staff is doing in the buildings, this policy would remove us from agreeing to put backpack mail out for anyone, whether digital or physical. That would include nonprofits and for-profit entities in the area. Any questions on this before I read the motion?
And are a lot of them adjustments to existing policies? Or these-
Several of them are adjustments. Many of them are that are new, just bring us into line with federal or state regulation on that. There was nothing monumental or unique to Plympton or Silver Lake in any of these. So seeing no further, I make a motion to accept as the first read ACAB, BEDB, BHE, EFC, EFD, DHAA, EHB, GBEE, IJNDC, JICJ, KDC, KDCB, KHB, and KHC.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to negotiations. Would you like to report out on the meeting, or would we like to get to the sub under that first?
I think the meeting that we attended was simply going over ground rules and establishing a first meeting
Okay.
with the Plympton teachers.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the establishment who we're in negotiations with. The reorganization of the subcommittee. This is here specifically because John has been our chief negotiator for over 10 years now. And in rejoining the committee and coming back into negotiations. Dan, I know that afternoon sometimes can be tough with the work schedule, and you are the alternate for negotiations. I was wondering if perhaps you'd be comfortable with John sliding into the alternate and keeping Kate and Rob as our primary negotiators for the contract.
That's fine.
Okay. So I'll make a motion that we put John in as the alternate for the negotiation team. Do I have a second? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Union 31?
As I said, we have a meeting coming up February 25th. Should be jam-packed with lots of stuff, particularly contracts and potential positions and things like that. At the shared cost space.
Pat?
The January 6th meeting was canceled. The next meeting is scheduled for February 6th.
Excellent, thank you. Capital improvement, capital request. I'm going to defer this to some of the items that are in the presentation as presented by the administration. Legislative aging. The governor's budget for public schools, specifically schools like ours, is atrocious. I think we got 15 grand to play with. Yay. Don't spend it all in one place. Am I bitter? A little bit. Jesus. Yeah. So, I'm going down to DC to talk to Congress and the Senate next week. I don't know what to tell you guys. I'm just hoping that we will continue to maintain Title I and Title II and Title IV funding that we currently receive. I'm hoping that IDEA doesn't see a reduction in participation at the federal level. Last year's federal budget had IDEA funded at about 14% statutorily. It's supposed to be 14% statutorily. It's supposed to be 40. So we're like 3 times below where we're even supposed to be. IDEA is the federal equivalent of circuit breaker. It's where our 240 grant comes from. It's super, super important, not only for the kids who receive special ed services, but also to the kids who don't receive the special ed services in our town, because we do utilize operating dollars to try and make sure we're meeting the legal and the moral obligation we have to the special ed students. If we had those federal dollars, we'd be able to reallocate some of our operating budget in different ways. So I'm not very hopeful about my trip down, but I'm still going. It was questionable whether or not I was going to make the trip this year with some of the comments about getting rid of the Department of Education. I have nothing against trimming down bureaucracies, especially if that means more dollars for the students in our schools. I'm just concerned about how those dollars are going to get allocated to the states moving forward. So, that's our legislative agent report. I apologize for how sad it is. Single signature warrants.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our meetings were previously out of sync with the town's bill schedule. As such, there was a single signature warrant totaling $86,325.90 that was signed digitally and submitted to the town on December 23rd. Tonight, we sync back up with the town schedule, and there's a warrant circulating for signatures totaling $52,924.77, which I'll bring to the town tomorrow morning.
Questions for Sam? Moving on to administration, CASA. We had the Winterfest recently, Mr. Veneto.
We did. It's in my report.
Excellent. You want to get into your report?
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Currently, we have 250 students enrolled here at Dennett. It sounds odd that we're hiring people in January, but we do have 2 new hires. Miss Kelly Morrissey was hired for our Title I position. And we were able to acquire Miss Ava Garricky to work with our EL population. CASA has been busy. They sponsored a show starring a BMX professional bike rider, Manny Higuera, and the show had themes of anti-bullying and achieving your goals. Ms. Moresco hosted the Dennett Winter Concert on December 18th. On January 22nd, we had an all-school Rocks meeting. The theme was community. Tomorrow night at 5 o'clock, I'll be hosting Are You Smarter Than a Sixth Grader? We did this 2 years ago, and it was a huge success, so we're going to give it a shot again. Friday, January 31st, our gym floor is being resurfaced. I'm getting reports from basketball that's in very slippery shape, so we're going to get that done Friday. February 5th is our 100th day of school. CASA is treating us to a teacher luncheon being held on February 14th. And February 17th begins our February vacation.
Any questions for Peter? Thank you, Mr. Veneto.
Thank you.
To our Director of Finance and Operations.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the financial report, which was in your digital folders. On page 1, you can see that there's an overage in the substitute lines, both if you combine the daily subs and the long-term subs. And this I brought to your attention back in October, so that's a continuation of that. Also, the new extended school year staffing lines, which I spoke about previously, those were created to report expenditures appropriately, and money was budgeted for that in the tuition lines. On page 2, the psychologist was moved to an appropriate special ed line. Again, the salary was budgeted in the special ed lines, the 9,000 accounts. You can see there's a contracted services. That's the one-to-one nurse. That is a new line, and that was unbudgeted for in FY25. On pages 3 and 4, there's a lot of moving parts with special ed. The special ed bookkeeper maintains a separate spreadsheet tracking special education contracted services, tuitions, and transportation for both for the operating budget, the circuit breaker revolving account, and the 240 grant funds. The spreadsheet, which was updated for this meeting, shows a deficit of about $38,000 at this time, and this includes the nursing contracted services from the page 2. Any questions about the financial report?
I don't see any, Sarah, but I'd like to say thank you again for updating the chart showing where our deficits are, how we've attempted to overcome them internally, and what might be left over for the town to deal with in special town meeting in May. I'm going to be sharing that information with the town in a couple of weeks to see where they stand, and then I will report back to the committee of how we shall proceed. So thank you very much for that. I know there was also some questions and comments about potentially how much it would cost for 4 full-time equivalent aid and a 1.0 full-time equivalent aid to be brought into this year's current budget. Sarah did provide that information as well, but it's something we can maybe talk about when we get to the budget for next year, how we're going to finish up this year as well. So just, yeah, go ahead, John.
So the nursing contracted services, that's going to stay under that line, or does it stay, is it in special ed?
So that, it is a special ed line. What designates a line number as special ed
Yeah.
is that after the LO4 is the 3 digits 002. So 000 is regular ed, 002 is special ed, and 003 is vocational.
So that's going to show up in a summary under special ed?
Yes.
Not under general?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I had to create that line because we didn't have one, and I figured
Yeah.
as long as I was creating a line, I was going to create it appropriately.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful, thank you.
Moving on, for the next part of my report, grant awards and acceptance. So state law requires approval by the school committee for receipt of all grants and donations. So in the report that was in your digital files, we have for you tonight a $1,700 donation from the 1-8 Foundation, which is the Open Sci-Ed, the funding source for Open Sci-Ed, and that is for science curriculum materials and professional development.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the donation for $1,700 to fund Open Sci-Ed. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Anything further for Sarah before we move on? No? Thank you, Sarah.
Can I
Appreciate
ask
it.
a quick question?
Oh, go ahead, sir.
So the 38K deficit, is that where we currently are budgeted as far as the deficit, or is that the projected end of year budget deficit?
So that is just a piece, if you recall, when I was talking about the long-term subs and the short-term subs, there's a deficit there as well. So with the special ed, because the special ed expenditures are funded by the operating budget and a revolving account called Circuit Breaker and through grants, it's important for us to factor all of those things in. So that $38,000 deficit in those 3 accounts, the tuition, the transportation and contracted services, is just a piece of the overall deficit.
And we're going to get to that number later on, or?
The overall number I'm using currently, based on the information provided to me by Sarah, is about $50,000.
Okay, so it's
But that's without
That's the
anything.
net.
That's approximately what we're looking at. That's if nothing else goes sideways between now and June.
Okay. And that's what we're going to approach special town meeting with?
That's what we're hoping to approach special town meeting with. If you recall, when this first started, it was closer to $250,000, right? So
43.
tremendous work's been done to really whittle that down and focus it in. Hopefully it won't grow, but I'm ready for it to, if necessary, to meet the needs of the students of the school, and I'll work with the town if that occurrence happens.
Okay. So sticking with 50 for now.
Yeah, that's where we are ballparked right now, pretty close to that.
And that's after taking the money out of the special ed reserve fund, which the selectmen did, and some excess circuit breaker, and then the tuition from Halifax for single year. So the total deficit was closer to 200, but it's gotten down to about 50.
On to our assistant superintendent, Dr. Clifford.
Hi, everyone. I just have a few things to go over tonight. The first is, as you recall, I mentioned before about the curriculum review committee. It's a K through 12 curriculum review cycle that we're going through. Math is first. So this year, they're there's a large math steering committee, and as part of that, two subsets of the math steering committee are the K through 6 core review team and the 7 through 12 core review team. And they're both looking at new mathematics curriculum for next year. At the K through 5 level in particular, our contract with Envisions runs out, and we need to look at new math curriculums, which that committee is doing right now. We're looking at different curriculums, reviewing them, as is the middle school at grades 7 and 8. So a larger math steering committee broken into two separate smaller committees, a K through 6 and a 7 through 12. And I'll report back, I'll report periodically how those groups are doing. Right now, they're looking at curriculum, and towards the end of May or middle of May, we'll be able to come to the school committee and present more information about that. Another thing that I spoke about this fall was the literacy needs assessment. And so basically an update on that is that all focus groups have happened, the inventories where faculty and staff filled those out, and surveys have been completed by all 4 districts. A report from the Hill for Literacy will be discussed, which it was, with the district literacy leadership team on January 23rd. So at that meeting, people who are part of that committee met with the Hill for Literacy. They presented all the findings that they had from all the data they gathered, and they gave us a report. And also, there's an update that's going to be provided to each one of the faculties at each school at faculty meeting in February, where all that information will be reviewed. And then on March 6th, the findings from that report, that district literacy leadership team will meet and create a literacy plan led by the Hill for Literacy. I'll also come and share that information with you too at that time and give you some updates on that. But basically, a plan for literacy for the next 3 to 5 years is what will be the outcome of that literacy plan. And
Cliff, can I just ask a question specific to that? And that will bring us into compliance with DESE's move towards the science of reading, correct?
Yes, exactly. There will be elements of that will be specifically addressing science of reading. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then, let me see, other information. Secondary, 7 through 12 information, student competency determination. MCAS is not a requirement anymore. Students must meet the local district graduation requirements. Participation on MCAS is required by federal and state law. Other things that are tied to MCAS will continue. For instance, scholarships at Adams, the Koplik, and the Seal of Biliteracy will still continue to use MCAS scores for qualifying. We're working right now with the high school to create language that really clearly articulates in the program of studies that we'll go over with the Silver Lake School Committee about that to highlight that. So the last piece is specific to elementary. We've been working on writing professional learning communities, so time spent in November and early December analyzing and reflecting on fall writing benchmark. So writing data, looking at common assessments, calibrating, looking at student writing, and that will be happening again the first week in March. STAR reading and math have been completed for the middle of the year, and grade level data meetings are happening throughout all 3 K through 6 districts. And MCAS windows have been selected so that we know when MCAS is going to happen, and I'm sure the school will be sending out information to families to let them know about that. That's everything I have for tonight.
Questions? Thank you very much. So on to our superintendent, Dr. Burke.
In your packet tonight, you'll find a draft of the proposed school calendar for the 25-26 school year. I'll just point out that we, to the best of our ability, tried to keep things as similar to the past in terms of where certain days fell. The in-service days for teachers will be August 25th and 26th. The first day of school for students will be August 27th. I want to draw your attention to December. December 23rd would be a half day, and students would not return to school until January 5th. We would have that January 2nd off rather than open the school for that second week if this calendar was approved. I also want to point out that the anticipated last day of school is June 12th, but we have 5 emergency or cancellation days worked into the calendar, And so if we were to use all 5, that would bring us to June 22nd. We also have added a note that the tentative last day of school is a half-day for elementary and the middle school. So depending upon where it falls. So sometimes we get questions about that, so we added that asterisk, but we don't know when the last day of school will be because we don't know how many days we'll have off. So I'm looking for your vote of approval.
Any questions about the calendar, Superintendent? And I would entertain a motion to approve. So moved by John, seconded by Dan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our second item is the budget presentation for this evening. So I will just begin by talking about the goals that we always have as we put together a level services budget. We've got maintaining students' needs, maintaining class sizes and structures necessary for effective instruction. And this year, the school committee also asked us not only to prepare a level service budget, but to provide the cost of restoring positions. So the level service budget would in fact help us to support the strategy for district improvements. And that's also always on our mind as we put together our budgetary requests for the school committee and the towns to consider. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt. So the line item budget that was in your school committee packet, you'll notice that it looks vastly different from previous years. I like to use the phrase, you've heard of the phrase, building an airplane while you're flying it. I'm actually building an airplane and flying it at the same time. That's the FY25 budget. And then beside me, I'm building the FY26 budget. So for the FY26 budget, I have overhauled the chart of accounts to bring us, all 4 entities that I work with, into an alignment with the Department of Education chart of accounts. That will allow me to fully use the financial software we have and the power of that to for reporting purposes, where we're limited right now because of how the chart of accounts was designed. So in order to do this, we have created the FY26 budget with the new budget lines. We did that process through October through January. I will be entering the new budget lines into the financial software in February through May, upload the approved budget into the financial software in June, and we'll go live on July 1st. One of the big factors of why the budget looks different is there are really only 6 ways that a school district can spend money: professional salaries, clerical salaries, and other salaries. And you'll notice I put a line there. Everything above the line gets paid out through payroll. Everything below the line gets paid out through accounts payable. And so when I met with the principals when we started the budget process in October, I explained to them when they did their budgeting, they were just going to be budgeting the contracted services, the supplies and materials, and the other expenditures. And so this is how everything went out to the principals in October. Also, when I met with the principals in October, we reviewed the broad categories that the Department of Education uses for expenditures. We refer to them as the thousands, so 1,000s being district leadership and administration, the 2,000s instructional services. Do I need to read through all of them? You have this in your packet. So any questions on this part here? Yes.
So I probably miscategorize these and call these cost centers, but I understand where they come from and know that they align perfectly with school budgets for Massachusetts. Are we going to, before we vote on a budget, have the detail of this, or are we proceeding forward with just this level of detail for the budgets?
So the line item budget, which has specifically the lines and the amounts, was in your packet.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you. All right.
And I will post that on the website tomorrow.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you, Sarah. That was
For all.
my major question.
This presentation and the line item budget that were presented
I
tonight.
appreciate that.
So the next slide is a summary. It's just a breakdown of the different categories. There are 4 different charts on here. The top left-hand quadrant is the FY26 budget as presented, breaking up the regular education costs, the special education costs, and the vocational education costs by those broad categories, the 1,000s, 2,000s, 3,000s, and so on. Below that, in the bottom left-hand quadrant, is the FY25 budget broken down in the same way so that we can compare FY26 to FY25. The top right-hand quadrant is the percent increase for the different categories from FY25 to FY26, and then the bottom right-hand quadrant is the amount of the increase from FY25 to FY26.
Can I just ask
Yes.
two things? One, when we go back to the ways we can spend money, do those line up with the 1,000, 9,000 categories? Or no?
So, for example,
Yeah.
2,200 is a principal line.
Yeah.
In the principal line, we can pay the principal's salary, the principal clerical salary, principal support salary if there's a paraprofessional in the office, and then the principal can have supplies and materials, contracted services maybe for a copy machine, and then other for like dues and membership and travel and PD and things. So every single one of those the 1,000, the 2,000 can have any of,
Has a
well,
mix.
not every single one. There's a couple.
Generally, they could have a mix. There's
Yes.
probably exceptions because there's always exceptions.
And with the way the accounts are structured now, I can take the budget and I can sort it by the 2,000 accounts and say, this is instruction, or I can sort it by the object code and say, these are your professional salaries, which I couldn't do previously.
And I guess the second question is, would it be helpful, and perhaps for the audience as well, for us to let you get through the whole presentation before the questions come? Because some of us have had the opportunity to look at the slides ahead because we're cheating. So maybe that does make sense for just let you kind of go through the whole presentation and we can come back.
Okay. So the next slide is just a summary of the preliminary budget for FY26. So what I have put together for you is a level service budget. Our FY25 circuit breaker, that should say FY26. Our FY26 circuit breaker is estimated at $107,109. The regular day reflects a 7.7% increase of $236,503. Special education reflects a 55.4% increase of $475,635. Salaries, those professional, clerical, and other salaries are 68.7% of the budget. I have increased the substitute lines, both the daily subs and the long-term sub lines, based on a multi-year average. Utilities have also been increased based on a multi-year average. The shared cost budget is included in here. The shared cost budget has not been voted by the joint committee yet. The total budget is an increase of 19.7%, which is an increase of $783,138 more than last year.
I can't follow your rule, Jim.
Well, as long as you're going to talk to what's been put up, I just think it's
Yeah,
hard.
happy to talk to just what was on that last slide. Sarah, you alluded to our estimate of $107,000 potentially for circuit breaker. That is not included in the $783,000 increase, correct? Could we subtract that 107 from that? Okay, so the total increase is before circuit breaker and anything else that could go our way.
Correct.
Thank you.
So in this FY26 budget, there is an amount for homeless transportation, which is a placeholder. I put in a token amount. There has not been homeless transportation, but we could see some. The out-of-district vocational, that's the agricultural school students. We currently have one student that will continue in agricultural school. I budgeted 3 placements total. Applications can come in, and students have up until April 1st to make a commitment to attend or not attend if they're accepted for that. There are no school choice reductions taken in this budget. Things that are not included in this budget or updated in this budget, you had asked about restoring positions. The amount to restore those positions was $81,978, so that would be an additional cost. There was no request for additional staffing other than those restored positions. The REAP grant, we don't have amounts for yet, and the circuit breaker we have an estimate for. Those have not been factored into this budget yet. The potential enrollment increases for kindergarten we don't know about enrollment yet. For ELL needs, currently Plympton has a 0.5 FTE teacher that was approved after the FY25 budget was approved, so it was not in FY25, but that has been included in the FY26 level service budget. So Peter, this is you.
Thank you. As Sarah mentioned, it's really difficult to predict what our kindergarten numbers are going to look like. I use 40 as a placeholder almost every year. We used to get information from the town census, and it's become more and more inaccurate. It's just not reflective of what we're actually getting for students in K. If all the other grade levels remain the same and we got 40 in kindergarten, that would put our total at 260 students next year to start.
Do you want to move to the next slide?
Yes, please. As Sarah mentioned, these 4 positions have not made their way into the budget. One-to-one full-time equivalent aide, math interventionist, 1.0 full-time equivalent aide, and a 0.4 aide. And as Sarah mentioned, that totals $81,978.
Again, just to reiterate as well, Peter, these positions were asked to be included in the budget presentation at the request of the school committee.
Correct.
Thank you.
So our percentage of what we consider high needs students has increased virtually every single year. A student is high needs if they are designated as either low income, economically disadvantaged, an English language learner, or a student with disabilities.
Sorry.
In our current school year, we're looking at 37.5% of all students considered to be high need students. You don't have to go back too far to see how much our numbers have really grown over the last 5, 6 years, 7 years. Right before the pandemic, when we opened the doors in 2019, we started with 199 students. When we opened the doors this year, we had 251. That's quite a jump for a small little school.
And over a third of those students are categorized as high needs.
Correct. Capital needs and accomplishments, some things that we have been able to get done. The most interesting process I've ever seen, we removed and replaced the grease trap in the kitchen. That is done. We had a new meter and plumbing repair done to the filtration system, which is already getting old, if we can believe that. And we had some unanticipated hot water heating repairs. For needs coming up, one of the things that Mike Lawless and I discussed, and I believe he's having this conversation with everybody, is paying for a facility assessment that we were getting an accurate age and an accurate level of need for what we should be doing next, and we're best using our money as opposed to just kind of throwing a dart against the wall to see what should we be replacing next. How much time do we anticipate we have left with this mechanism or machine? We're constantly doing something with our filtration system. When Mike and I sat down, he suggested a round figure of keeping about 20 for any kind of water upgrades. And as we're learning, we're very blessed to have our new playground, but there is going to be a lot more upkeep and management for that particular playground as opposed to the other pieces that we had out here years ago.
So, did we not, are those numbers not, like, we're talking about fiscal year 26? Are we talking about the needs for 26 or the needs for this year?
Should be 26, John, I'm sorry.
Okay, so in fiscal year 25, we did the stuff on the left.
Yes, I'm sorry.
And
Yep.
the new needs are for 26.
Correct.
And, like, do we have specific upgrades that you need to do to the water system? I mean, that is...
I would want to say that the last few times that our operator has been here, he's made suggestions about you might want to do this, you might want to do that. And when he says might want to, it means you should be doing it.
I think before we even consider anything in the budget, we need specifics. Or we're gonna have to hold on.
Okay.
Because we, currently, at least before we even talked about it, we're at a 19% increase, which is not. It's just not. So, and a facilities assessment, I think, is certainly a good idea, but that's also probably gonna be a difficult one to entertain this year.
It's a lot of money.
To add to the budget, unless we can take it out of what we already have planned, but that's probably not possible.
How many days of school did you miss this year because of water-related problems, or last year? Is there 2 incidents?
I want to say 2. I want to say 2.
Like, that's a very expensive and not doubtful system.
I agree.
That costs us over $250,000 to put that
I
system.
remember.
So if there's certain things that aren't there, then we need to be operating on facts, not, we should probably think about throwing some money at it.
Agreed.
I can try to get specifics from our water operator.
Yeah, I mean, if they say, look, this is something you need to do because, 8 years out on a system, you need to do this, then, it's cost of doing business to some extent.
Correct.
But it would also be good to know those specifics, also from a town budget perspective, because, we can get, depending on how everything else runs in the town, if we've been good with our maintenance, and we have money in the maintenance line, we may be able to execute on some of these things. So it's really important, and I know we've got Mr. United talking to me to get Mike to a town properties committee meeting, but we need to have an idea of what all these little costs are, because we may be able to execute them without having to add to the budget or do a warrant article. Because it's going to be really, really difficult to find extra money this year.
Let's see what I can find.
Yep.
That's it for me.
All right.
So our next step is to ask the school committee for their requests in terms of anything they would like to see, any questions they may have, what we should prepare for the next
So
meeting.
I don't see the detail in our packet, so I don't see a file that's the detail. So I'm sure it was meant to be there, but if you can add that, that would be great. I got lots of questions. But thanks for, I actually, I do like the way this was put together. I do love, well, I don't love the detail, but I usually get into the detail. But it did make it easy to sort of see. I think some of the questions are going on. For circuit breaker estimate for next year of 107,000, what was the assumption made for percentages compared to? And I would note for folks this year, and this is what we expected, it was about a $60,000 difference in drop because it's a reimbursement, so students that moved up to Silver Lake, we still got their reimbursement that we spent the year before. So we did expect a drop, but what was the percentage that we, yeah?
We used the 62%. It could be 75, but we used the 62 just to be on the safe side of caution.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure if that also reflects the 240 grant, which you can expect to get. That's approximately anywhere from $65,000 to $70,000. It's gone up about $1,200 every single time we apply for it. So that, I'm not sure if it's included in the budget as well. But that would
It's
be-
not.
It's not. So
It's not.
now you have your circuit breaker and your 240 grant money.
Well, that would be a similar amount to what
For
we.
revenues.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to use the 75% for circuit breaker because it's already included in House 1 from Governor Healy.
Is it?
It is.
Then we can change that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, and I appreciate the fact that we included 3 students potentially going to the vocational technical school because that is an eventuality that could come to pass. So that's another area by April 1.
Why don't we
Question
talk,
about that.
why don't we talk to FinCom when we meet with them
Agreed.
on the 10th?
Yeah.
My guess is their desire is going to be to only budget for the one.
Right. And come at it from the
And then
other
if April comes and we have another, or if in March we receive an application, then we're going to have to adjust it then.
Right.
But at a minimum, I think if they want to leave a buffer, it's going to be 2, not 3.
Understood. But I appreciate it being there just
Yeah.
to acknowledge the fact
Yeah.
that our budgets used to carry 3.
Right.
And we, over the years, have trimmed that back every year.
At
to try and-
FinCom's request.
At FinCom's request. So that is our traditional starting place. I appreciate that number being. Any questions, comments?
I was going to ask about that. So if those budgeted in don't actually come to fruition, where does that put us?
Well, it's about $60,000 less if it's only one child who we anticipate.
And what about the homeless transportation that we don't?
I agree with Sarah.
I think I
don't
put
agree. I agree with Sarah. I don't think putting a number in for homeless transportation that is substantial.
Is that was
makes
just a
any
placeholder?
sense. Yeah.
For the line?
We've been let down year after year after year thinking we would get more to help us with weekend event students, and we have not.
Okay, so, yeah, so the numbers from 25 include the offsets for the 240 and circuit breaker. And the 26 numbers, we haven't taken it out of the numbers that are in the presentation yet, so that's still to come. So that's good news.
One of the other things that you have to remember too is that any student that is in preschool under Silver Lake that's out of district
Yep.
moves up now to
Yep.
Plympton because of kindergarten. So you are going to have that bit of transition if there is a student, which there is this year.
And are we budgeting that?
Yes.
So that's already anticipated.
Yep.
You and I are getting along great.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I love it. No, it has to be in the
No, no,
budget. We don't want it not in the budget.
We're not mad at the
I'm
number.
thrilled that it's in the budget.
Yeah.
You know, it's a cost, we need to have it there because otherwise,
We need to figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah, I have way more in this budget, so.
yeah, no, I want anything that you expect to happen to absolutely be in the budget.
I mean, well, we got caught a little bit this year, in the current FY25 because we trimmed. And by October, we had already exceeded what we budgeted. So, a little bit of this is bounced back to reality of what we actually needed to function for this year. Plus some of the growth we're seeing in our special ed population and the cost of doing business. We are not unique in the state on the South Shore with seeing inflation finally come in from our households into the public sector and really affecting the cost of education across the state, especially in suburban communities on the South Shore this year. So the number is hard to look at, but for somebody who looks at everyone's budgets, it's not that surprising. And we have to just figure out where we want to go with everything. So I don't know if we're inclined right now to give the superintendent any guidance or if we want to meet and speak with the town first.
Yeah, I have one.
Please.
Sir.
I just wanted to let you know that I have put the line item budget in the folder.
Thank you, sir.
And then it will be on the website for the general public tomorrow along with the presentation.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So I have two hopefully not painful exercises that I think would be useful. We have a $475,000 increase in special education. Is it possible to break that down, because I think it's going to be important to understand for folks, between increased costs for existing placement versus net new placement, like big numbers? Because my guess is that's not, it's not all new placement. There's a
It
fair
is
amount of
not.
increase in there that I think needs to be understood by the
Sure.
townspeople as well as the finance committee.
There's line items that got moved around as
Yeah.
well. That accounts for it, and certain positions weren't under special education that are now under special education, which could be another $100,000. So yes, I will break that
Yeah,
470,000.
so if we have some better idea of that, that would be great. And then I guess the other piece, I mean, we have some of it is net new positions. So, I mean, well, if our budget's going up that much, then I guess the question is, of net new placements, which of those are potentially eligible through circuit breaker the following year? In other words, if some, I already see you know where I'm going, which is,
They're all
and so as a result, you know, we've had this was an adjustment year. And then next year, in other words, we have some of these increases, but are we going to potentially, and it's all tea leaves, right? See some of that come back. And I think it's important to educate the finance committee on this, because we had many years of level to decreasing special ed budgets. And this is, so for most of the people doing this, this is all net new. And so for us to be able to walk them through how this works and understand how this goes and tell them to go call their state reps and hire from people to make sure we get better funding on things, that's kind of ways to get this going.
Each one of those students that we're looking at out of district, even if I subtract their foundation amount before I begin to look at circuit breaker reimbursement at 75%, all qualify.
Right. So we should see reimbursements better next year through the following budget. So all that would be very helpful for us to know.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I have it right here in writing that circuit breaker is fully funded. The full phase-in of special ed transportation is also fully funded.
75%.
It might be above 75%, but guaranteed at 75%. So for the first time in our state history, we are using some of the fair share monies towards circuit breaker. So $150 million of the fair share money is actually going towards transportation of special needs students. And we are working on increasing it beyond the statute level of 75% full funding, but we're at the beginning of a 2-year legislative cycle. Even if we got movement on that, I don't think we'd see it until FY 27, the earliest, probably FY 28. So anybody wants to make phone calls to the state reps and senators, please feel free. Because we're only in the first inning of the state budget, we could use some help, definitely. Because right now it's falling completely onto our, us at the local level. As we talked about all the way last spring, we kind of saw that this was coming. We knew this was going to be a difficult budget. But I do appreciate the time and the effort that you guys put into this to make sure we're fully meeting the needs of the kids of the Dennett to the best of our capabilities. We'll meet with the towns, we'll have some discussion with them about what direction they'd like us to go with it. But I think this was a good, solid first swing at what we need to function as a school system next year. I know the number's scary to look at. I'm gonna wait right now before I let myself, digest the 19.7, because I think that it's kind of not exactly where we're gonna end up. So let's just hold back. John?
One of the, for vote, I noticed we budgeted at 35 ahead, and yet we're paying 39.9. Is that just about intentional, or should we be budgeting at 40 ahead?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
We budgeted for the 3 heads to vote, it looks like at 35.
Mhm.
But we're paying 39.9 in this year's budget. That's what we have for 1 head in the budget right now. Should it be 39.9 or 40,000, or should it be 35?
I will look into that.
Doesn't some of the numbers presented include the transportation for that student?
I separated out the transportation, so it's 2 different lines.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just looking straight at tuition. Thank you. Oh, and then, I know we talked about the paras and this year. I don't think we can do anything until we get a next round of the budget. Because we can't hire and then, because they're not even in the new budget, so that's a problem.
I agree. And I also think we need to confer with the town to see what their appetite is as well for this current fiscal situation before we even talk about initiatives as well. So we'll hold off having a vote and bringing back the .4 and the 1.0 full-time equivalent paras for the building. And we have our next meeting the day after February vacation. So we're all going to be well rested, our minds going to be clear and fresh, and then we're going to have to sit down and potentially have a really thought-provoking and important conversation about where our values lie as a community, where our values lie as a school, and where we want to see the investments of our dollars go to support the education of the students of the town. Did you have a question?
I think you just answered one of them. The almost 800K overdrive, which is the almost 20%. That included the restoration, that did not include the restoration positions that you had mentioned, and the positions that Mr. Benito mentioned before. That's not included. The capital projects that he had mentioned also is not included. The second question was the refunding of the emergency fund that we had drained for this year. Is this getting populated as part of the budget, or how does that get populated?
That would be if we had any bandwidth at the town level to put 50K back in.
Okay.
We funded all of that with excess monies in the school budget during better times.
Sure. I just didn't know if we were planning to fill that up again.
We should, but I'm not sure this is going to be the year.
Okay.
Which isn't awesome.
Any other questions, comments before we adjourn for this evening? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for sitting through the meeting, for showing the concern to be here and give up such a large portion of your evening. Thank you to the administration for putting together the budget and giving us some time to digest it as a committee. So again, we will be together the Monday after February vacation for our next regularly scheduled meeting. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. And do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.